ID.
My name is Suresh Shaitu, and clearly there's a need for prudent management in this juncture in our history, because it seems as though we ran into bankruptcy because of poor governance from way back from Eric William days to this current administration. Well, corruption has been a huge problem in this island. That's all for now.
We could do it away if you wish, because I said some very important things afterwards. Question.
I was reading here. One of the reasons you're writing the president is the request to be a witness during the inquiry.
That's correct.
Has a date been given to the start of the inquiry?
No, they haven't set a date yet.
So nobody has reached out to you being an advocate for the...
Nobody, no. But I did write to the president because I asked for her advice. I asked how she could give me advice on how I can appear before the commissioners. I thought that it was the best and the most judicious route to take, rather than writing directly to the commissioners. I thought I should write to her, and I submitted a letter to her. I have it here. It's 15th of August 2019, and I haven't yet received a reply. So I would really like to appear before the commission, and I would like to give the entire story. If I could get 2 hours before the commission, I'd be very happy, so I can give the entire story of this project, unlimited by the constraints of a very limited terms of reference. Yeah?
Do you have any other concerns in terms of the format of the inquiry? It was only announced recently, so not much information has been given. What suggestions would you have?
That's all I have. I think that the terms need to be broadened, but I have a deep respect for Justice Ventor and the other persons who are the commissioners. And I believe that if they proceed with this commission as it is, they'll be wasting taxpayers' money, and it'll be very unsatisfactory, and it will open themselves up to a whole lot of claims by all other parties who have been negatively and significantly afflicted, and they will not be dealing with all of those other concerns. Yeah? And I think, for example, the opposition will be within their rights. Kamala Prasad said within their rights. Why are you picking and choosing on us? What about the conception of the project? What about the certification of the project, which occurred in 2010, 1 month before the general elections? 1 month before the general election, the certificate was granted to this project. In my mind, this was unethical, and I have reasons for saying so. And it was granted by then Minister of Works, Mr. Colin Imbert. A rush to certification, despite the advice of scientists and the experts in the field. So from the very beginning, this project was flawed because of poor certification. You're obeying the line minister, you're constrained, Dr. Jodh Singh constrained to listen to the line minister rather than the technicians on the ground. So once that happens, once the foundation is spoilt and impugned, everything else collapses. And I'm not surprised that they have such a mess with this project, that there's so much corruption with it, and it collapsed eventually.
We're seeing 2 elections coming up. Do you have a concern or a request even to have the commission done within a time frame?
Well, I don't think that the election should be used as a factor. I think that it should be done fairly and using good jurisprudence, and I think it should be done honorably and equitably. I don't think that elections have anything to do, in my view, with that.
What I mean by that is, do you think it should be done before a change or continuation of the current government? Do you think it should happen within the next 2 months, say, or do you think it will get lost between electionary?
I think in all matters of jurisprudence and all matters which come before a court, and I treat the commission as a court, it should be done promptly and it should be done fairly.
The reason I'm asking is, if there is a change of government, you're saying that there were questionable activities in terms of the granting of the certificate a month before election, which means that would have been under the PP government.
No, that was the PNM government.
Or you meant the last?
The PNM government granted the certificate for David Amandisir.
Right.
Colin Imbert. He was the line minister. Right, that's why I'm saying these things have to be looked at. If you don't look at that, that's a PNM as far as I am concerned. That's a PNM foible or sin. You have to look at those things too. Don't just pick and choose. You have the whole hog. Why only dealing with the little tail or the snout or whatever? Deal with the whole hog. Jurisprudence, good jurisprudence and good inquiry deserves that. The people will have to know. Nobody will be charged after this. But what you will have is a document showing what really happened to your money. What really happened in this process. Mr. Tulsi deserves to know that. He's a taxpayer. He's a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago. He's a law-abiding citizen. He deserves to know. Sangeeta deserves to know as a young child. She deserves to know. So you just can't pick and choose who you're going to attack. You have to deal with the plethora of processes involved in this project. And it has nothing to do with electioneering at all. I just think that it has to be done promptly and in good time.
When the government recently announced that a commission would be launched, some of the reasonings they gave, your reasoning might have been a little different. What they seemed to focus on was, millions being given to homeowners to move and then they not having to move at all because of a redirection or whatever reasons. What are your thoughts on that in terms of the claims by the government that millions were given to people who did not even need to move in the first place?
Well, millions of dollars was wasted. Why? Dr. Kublase went in a hunger strike, you remember that? Starting in Pfizer in 2012. And out of that came the Armstrong report. $1 million was paid for it. The government paid $692,000. Armstrong came up with his report. The Prime Minister, Dr. Kamala Prasad, decided to ignore it. One of the recommendations of that report is that the compensation and relocation policies were flawed. So if they had heeded with Dr. Armstrong, what would have happened? So he has outlined everything. He has created a template for good governance. The government went and ignored the man. Dr. Armstrong and his 19 experts. That's what I'm saying. All of this, the whole plethora of things were flawed. That is why you end up in that. If you start the foundation of the house and the ring beam is bent when you put up the roof, what happened to your roof? It gets squonky. And that's what happened. That's clearly what I'm saying. And I've challenged a lot of projects. Smelter, the project there where the government wants to build housing on the Nicholson nurseries, the Arima people in the market. And I understand these things clearly. Sorry to say, I say with the greatest respect. The thing was flawed from the beginning, and we're paying money, and we're like fools going along with Commission of Inquiry. We want the whole thing to be studied and investigated. Dr. Rowley has to do it. I'm asking for it. So, Bill, you wanted to add anything?
No, I think I said quite a bit. Yeah? Everybody's okay?
You want us to stand aside and do it because I don't want it to be conflated with this story.
Why don't we just leave?
No, you don't have to leave, no.
To you guys.
If you could just stand aside and...
Views of the MSG or your own?
I don't know what David's views are, but it's my view.
Right, so
Yeah.
you can go ahead and say what you have to say.
Yeah.
All right.
And I will do a statement on behalf of MSG.
No.
Full statement.
I find that governments tend to act illegally here. Now, it seems to be very inadvisable for governments and their agents. I'm talking about the government's agents now, the surveillance apparatus, to be collecting data on this one, to be collecting data on Mr. Chaitu, to be collecting data on David, to be collecting data on Mr. Duke, and doing nothing about it, actionable information, doing nothing about it in the court. And then when that particular individual comes and says something which is hurtful to you, that you go back in your files like Jack Warner and bring it out and put it before the court. That is oppressive. And that is what the government has precisely done. If you want to charge the man with sedition, why didn't you go back to that time when he made it and you charged him? So now Mr. Duke is my brother. I want to tell Trinidad and Tobago, he is my blood brother. He is my brother. We fight for the same thing. He's a man who has greatness marked upon his brow. I've seen it. The same kind of things they used to do to Martin Luther King. The same things they used to do to Mr. Tubally Buzz Butler. Get a lot of information and use it against him. Let the man do his great things. He's fighting for the trade union movement. He's fighting for the working class. He is very dedicated to his duty. He takes his bullhorn and he goes to work every day in a very dedicated way, just as Mr. Rowley or Dr. Rowley is doing his dedicated work. Leave the man alone. Deal with crime. You have plenty of things to deal with. You deal with Duke, a patriot, a son of the soil. I want to stand up for people. If you make a mistake, let the man make a little mistake, if it is so. So what the government is doing is harsh, it's oppressive, and he's my brother. I appear with him, I go and I visit him regularly, we shake hands, and I've told him his political party, whenever it comes out, I will support him, just as I support the MSJ, the working classes, and the lands, peoples, and communities of Trinidad and Tobago. That's my brother. Don't touch the man. Ultra-virus means against the law. Please, leave the man alone now. That's my statement.
Very good.
I don't know if it's very good, but they touch the man for nothing. So Tulsi is laughing. It's a serious matter here, you know.
Mr. Abdullah, you want to make a statement on the UTT workers who are being fired? They get given their letters of retrenchment.
Well, when was it? Last week, Sunday gone, we had a press conference and we dealt with retrenchment at UTT and Unilever, Agostini, and so on. And Crystal Bernard, who was one of our activists, spoke to that issue of retrenchment and expressed solidarity. So I'll leave that one alone. Okay? Not that we leave it alone, sir. We already commented on it. And tomorrow evening at 6 at MSJ office, I will say quite a bit. All right? So let me deal with the other things and allow comments to just stand with the HRM this morning.
Yes.
All right? Other than that,
I have one request. Sorry, David.
Yes,
One
sure.
request that you don't conflict both stories, please. Could you put them as separate packages if you
State or something.
Yeah, man, this kind of sedition thing is not appropriate.
What?
He's a man who is after my own heart. He just fight like me.
Freedom Day.
When I miss Mr. Duke, I feel inspired. He's a man who's acting now. He's action.
Yeah.
All right?
We have now 6 candidates. We want the candidates.
You're welcome.
We feel we have to get.
All right, thanks very much, Mr. Clifton. The government has established a good commission of inquiry, and the terms as follows: to inquire into the actions of and on behalf of the state in acquiring and taking steps to acquire properties and structures in respect of the construction of the extension of the Solomon Ochoy Highway Extension to Point Fortin. Very good, very laudable. But these terms are too narrow, and they do not and will not cover the extent of malfeasance, malpractice, and corruption associated with this project. And to get the real truth of it, it has to be done ethically, and it has to be done with good jurisprudence. That is, you need to expand the terms of this Commission of Inquiry, and I say so with all due respect to the commissioners, Justice Ventura, with all due respect to him and his fellow commissioners. But you have the whole hog of corruption associated with this project, the whole hog of malpractice associated with this project, the whole hog of basically reneging on promises and good conduct, and you're just dealing with the tail or the foot or the snout. We want a commission of inquiry into the whole thing, from certification, the conception, which began in the days of Mr. Manning, to the certification process, which was done under the PNM, to the execution, which was done under the government of Kamala Bissessa, the PP, and today's government, because we have the Minister of Works right now with the matter in court for failing to abide by a promise which she gave to the HRM to consult with them. And Dr. Rowley is very much part of that, what we call a spectacular effort to deceive the HRM, telling them that they would consult and they didn't. So the malpractice and malfeasance is even occurring today, but that matter is before the court, so that we not talk so further on it. So you need to expand the terms of the inquiry from the conception of it across governments to the certification of it, to the reason why it collapsed, and today's current atmosphere of what's happening now. A failure to do that will be to give the people a false and improper picture of the whole scenario, and we need to see the whole scenario, what happened, because what happened at the beginning has defined what happened subsequent to that. And I have written to the President, Madam Justice Paula per week, Her Excellency, and I have asked her to give me an advice on how I can appear before the commissioners so that I can give them the tale of the HRM with respect to this, from conception to certification to collapse and so on. And I wrote to her on the 15th of August, and I hope I get a good reply to her. And if I go before the commission, I would like to get 2 hours to explain to the public of Trinidad and Tobago in what bad ways, what a panoply of ways, what a whole range of ways in which their monies have been misspent. And I want to remind you all, as members of the public, that this project is perhaps the most expensive project ever undertaken, infrastructure project in the Southern Caribbean. It's going to amount to about $10 billion of taxpayers' money, and I would like you to see how your monies have been spent and the way the governments have been abusing your finances. Minister Dukran, for example, when he was a member of the PP government, he allowed Jack Warner to maneuver and outmaneuver him and take funds directly from the Treasury against the advice of the IDB, who said, this is a big project, it's too big to start this project. And Mr. Dukran did nothing about it. So these are the things I want to talk about. I want to show who is to blame, and the public needs to show and to pinpoint all those persons who have led to the collapse of this and the waste of people's money, your money. Thank you very much. David, I think we should say. Yeah.
Okay, David Abdullah, political leader of Movement for Social Justice, the MSJ. We have been in solidarity with the highway route movement from day one with respect to the issue of the Debe to Mont Desir highway. In fact, even when I was a senator in the partnership government, we hosted as MSJ a press conference together with the highway route movement on this particular issue, and we were very critical of the decision to proceed with the Debe to Mont Desir highway. We believe and we support fully the call by the HRM that the Commission of Inquiry that has been appointed is too limited in its focus because it needs to address the issue of the responsibility. Who was responsible for making decisions along the way for the construction of this huge project, and in particular the decisions with respect to the Mont Desir to Debe highway, which section of the highway has huge and has already had huge negative impacts on the communities of the South in terms of flooding and so on, disruption of communities, disruption of settlements, and of talking about disruption. That we support, therefore, the highway route movement in its call for the Commission of Inquiry to be broadened, because we need to know who is accountable, who was responsible for making the decisions that have had major negative impacts on the communities of the South with respect to flooding and other environmental problems, disruption of communities and of settlements and so on. This project is, as Dr. Kublai Singh has said, is a mega project. And it's very clear that governments past and present have been pursuing mega projects as if mega projects are development, when in fact they may not necessarily lead to sustainable development. Mega projects, on the other hand, lead themselves and lend themselves to possibilities of corruption. And it is no accident that these mega projects then are able to put hundreds of millions of dollars into the hands of persons whom Dr. Kublai Singh has called the contractocracy, and these become the financiers of political parties. So they get hundreds of millions of dollars in contracts, and then political parties get some of that back to finance their election campaigns and other activities. In the process, taxpayers are robbed because those resources are then to have been allocated and used for healthcare, for education, for roads, for community facilities, and ensuring sustainable employment, and so many other things that people need. So corruption is a major problem, and mega projects are contributors to the whole process of taxpayers losing money and money being stolen through corrupt activities. We also note, for example, that this government is pursuing the same type of approach. Highway to Valencia, highway to Toco port project and so on, housing projects where there are many questionable arrangements being made. And so we certainly support the widening of this inquiry because this project was undertaken without any economic assessment, no cost-benefit analysis, no hydrological surveys and so on, a flawed EIA process, and so many other things that were fundamentally wrong, which led to the spectacular collapse of the project some 3 years ago. And the public taxpayers need to know why these things happened, who was responsible, and who ought to be held accountable for this colossal project which has resulted in taxpayers losing hundreds of millions of dollars.
Okay.
Yeah, okay? All right, okay.
You have room for 2 more persons on the bus? Okay, Mr.
Yes, my name is Jason Nash. I'm a member of the MSJ, the Movement for Social Justice. What I want to say this morning is that I'm very disappointed in the People's National Movement. Since 2015 to now, September will be 4 years, and it's a completely failure. Workers just losing the job, while the Prime Minister only condemning and criticizing. Jennifer Battis, who is the Minister of Labour, she's a failure. The reason why I will say that with no apology is because she condemned the past, and she remind me that she worse than the past. Yeah? Because workers going home, and you as a Minister of Labour is stating that you cannot do anything about it. So the citizen give you a position to just collect money under false pretense. Yeah? I want to say it's a game playing with Kamala Persad-Bissessar and Dr. Keith Rowley. We have to change that system and bring in the movement for social justice. It's a form of survival. If you cannot put food on the table, you will die. They want to send us back to the plantation. They want to send us back to slavery. I want to say I am not going back to be any slave for any one of them. I am prepared to fight to save my beloved Trinidad and Tobago. Yeah? Thank you very much.
Very good. Just one more seat, but
Just change your mind.
sit up straight.
Good morning. My name is Suresh Chaitu. To recap all of this is really and truly we need to have the principles of governance enacted and properly done so. Too much corruption, and we need prudent management in our society currently. That's it. Take care. That one? Sit down.
That's it. Thank you very much, Mr. Cook.